Hey, welcome back, everyone. We're in a new year, and this week we've got a fantastic show. Kavya Pearlman, she's the CEO at the XR Safety Initiative and also works for Wallarm. She is here to talk about how we're going to protect the brave new virtual world. In our second segment, we welcome Chris Painter, the commissioner at the Global Commission on the Stability of Cyberspace, to discuss diplomacy, norms, and deterrence in cyberspace. In the security news, mysterious drones are flying over Colorado. 7 tips for maximizing your SOC, not your socks like you, but your security operations center. The most dangerous people on the internet this decade, according to one source. North Korean hackers stole highly sensitive information from Microsoft users. Critical vulnerabilities impact ruckus Wi-Fi routers, and someone thinks that these are the coolest hacks of 2019. Actually, that article was pretty good. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. This message is brought to you by Spirion. The data privacy revolution is the new age of protecting what matters most. Automatically and persistently discover and classify sensitive data with the most accurate solution on the planet. Understand the data within the context of your business and then take actions to control that data so you can operate with minimal friction and comply with the laws and regulations built to protect the personal data privacy of individuals across the globe. This is Spirion, protecting what matters most. Visit them on the web at securityweekly.com/Spirion.
Good evening and welcome to the show. But first, let's get started. And let me introduce you to our host right meow, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
He say right meow. Welcome everyone to this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. It's number 633, recorded on January 2nd, 2020. Right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left is Mr. Larry Pesce here in studio. Hey, Happy New Year, man.
Same.
Cheers. Drinking Whistlepig.
The good stuff.
On the lines remotely, Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Yes. Cat's waving in the background. Very nice.
Yes.
It's waving right meow.
Right meow.
Right meow. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
Sorry, I'm having an epileptic seizure because of the cat.
Mr. Lee Neely is here with us.
Virtual cheers, Happy New Year. Drinking some of that 1792 that was gotten on the 19th. Thank you very much. Let's rock it.
Let's do it. Are there no announcements? Is that? Oh, no, there is. Of course.
There must be announcements.
There are announcements. Join us at InfoSec World 2020, March 30th through April 1st at the Disney Contemporary.
Am I not here?
Oh, Joff's there.
just not here?
I see him now. So I didn't see him before. Hey, Joff Thayer's here with us before we get to announcements. Happy New Year, Joff. Welcome.
Well, Happy New Year. And by the way, I did not receive my bottle of whatever that was.
It's still in my office. We
Sam
haven't
got
shipped
sick.
them. Yeah, Sam was still sick.
Sam,
Yeah.
what is going on? Look, I am so glad it's 2020 because let's just put 2019 behind us. Really?
I agree.
I mean, let's just move on.
Well, I mean, do we have? If we don't have a time machine, I guess we don't have much of a choice now, do we?
Yeah.
So
It's awesome. I was not a fan of 2019. I just wasn't.
Yep, me either.
Well, in 2020, you get to look forward to going to InfoSec World at the Disney Contemporary Resort March 30th through April 1st. Our listeners receive 15% off the main conference or a world pass. You can go to securityweekly.com/ISW 2020. Click that register button, and it will automatically apply the discount code. We'd like to welcome Kavya Pearlman. She is known as the Cyber Guardian, an award-winning cybersecurity professional with a deep interest in emerging technologies. Kavya is the global cybersecurity strategist at Wallarm and is the founder of the nonprofit organization XR Safety Initiative, the very first global effort to promote privacy, security, ethics, and develop standards and guidelines for virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed environments. Kavya, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Cheers, you guys.
Yes, cheers. It's just coffee. We like coffee too. Coffee's good. Kavya, how'd you get your start in information security? It's actually a very interesting story. You alluded to it when we spoke previously, but you did not start out in a computer-related field.
That is correct. So my journey actually started in India, where I was, I grew up in India. 23 years of my life I spent there, and then I moved out to the United States in 2007. Decided to become a hairstylist. So from 2007 to 2011, I really was just cutting hair.
Yeah,
And,
I think Tyler's really the only one that could have maybe taken advantage of your one of your first professions.
I can appreciate that. It makes for an interesting resume.
And boy, does he need some help.
That is a nice mohawk, though.
That's how my middle son styles his hair the same way. He's 6 and he does it himself. I'm impressed.
With the hawk.
So yeah, I mean
That's
that's how my sort of career started as a hairstylist.
Yeah. So what prompted you to go from hairstylist into information security?
I remember that day very, very clearly. I was cutting hair for this gentleman, and he was a security analyst at a bank. And I asked him, like, first of all, I heard him. I'm like, oh my gosh, he must be really smart. And then as we talked, he was like, hey, you sound very interesting. Go ahead and read this book called Cyber War. And as a child, I always just, was somebody who wanted to change the world, do something with my life, and, like bring bad guys to justice or whatnot. All these thoughts were in my head. So when I read this book, Cyber War, it just clicked. And I literally just overnight, like right after I read the book, I was like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. And I don't know how and when it happens to people, but sometimes you just get a calling, right? You just feel like this is what you are meant to do. And I held on to that thing. Did my master's in network security, moved out to California, ended up working for Facebook in 2016 doing third-party security. And that's when I realized, I was like, wow, I think I'm meant to do this. And then ended up being a head of security for a virtual reality firm where I was protecting 2 virtual economies. And that's where this whole like cyber guardian thing started to happen. It's like, oh, wow, I'm really just protecting 2 virtual worlds. And all of these experiences gave me this unique set of knowledge and, ability to connect these dots and things that we've witnessed together, Cambridge Analytica scandals, all these other data breaches from 2017 to 19, all of this together put me on this quest to like, hey, how are we going to protect these brave new worlds?
Yeah. Now, speaking of brave new worlds, I think it was interesting in our discussions previously, we talked about virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. First, I'm curious how you got interested in this particular field as you held a position in your career for a company that did virtual reality or does virtual reality. But what's the difference between the environments? And I guess start with kind of what got you interested in it.
Sure. Yeah. And that's a very good question because, sometimes these 3 terms can be far too technical for a person to really distinguish as to what's really going on. So when it comes to virtual reality, it's really like a completely digitally simulated environment. It's an artificial environment created by a software, which you can utilize a head-mounted goggle to sort of immerse yourself into. That's your virtual reality, where your entire reality is captured by these goggles. On the other hand, augmented reality is something that we've mostly experienced. If you look at like Snapchat filters or Facebook filters, that's like an overlay of digital reality onto your existing reality. So those cat ears and those fake eyelashes that you can put with the Instagram filters and whatnot.
My kids love
That's augmented reality.
So what would have Second Life been called?
I was thinking the same thing, Larry.
So that's the difference. Second Life, so the company, the head of security that I was for was for Linden Lab, which basically started Second Life.
Yep.
And it is called a virtual world. And you can only experience Second Life through desktop environment. So you can only experience it through PC. So you're mostly using, your sort of agency is limited to what you feel, what you with the way you interact via an avatar. But then they started this new virtual world called CNSR, which was now in this immersive. Like now you can actually be inside any reality that somebody has created. So that's the difference, So I would call Second Life as the very first virtual world that was ever created and took off.
Cool.
That's interesting. Yeah, we talked a lot about Second Life when it came out.
Yep.
On
we
the
did.
show.
And then, of course, there was the website parody of getafirstlife.com,
Yes.
which I still love. Yep. Experience your wardrobe. Open your closet. Go outside and interact with real people.
Someday we need to record a segment completely in virtual reality.
Right?
So interesting, Jeff, that you
2020
say that.
Oh, here it comes. Wait for it. Wait for it.
So
Yeah.
very interesting that you say that. So there is a concept of timelines, which basically means that, and this is what we are doing right now, is a timeline. So on the 5th of January, we are literally going to be flying a starship, USS Enterprise, and I'm going to be the captain along with 4 of my folks in virtual reality. That will be our very first meeting for singularity defense, a concept that we are bringing together. So just like you have this podcast of Security Weekly, we're starting the exact same thing that you just said, and it's going to happen recursively. So it would be an ephemeral timeline, and you could join me at the starship.
Which version of the Enterprise will you be piloting?
Oh, boy.
Wow.
Okay. I will totally
Let me know.
tweet that out. I will totally tweet that out. You gotta wait for it. It's a surprise.
I think Jeff has them all memorized, all of the characteristics of all of the various.
You know what the coolest thing though is?
Joff
There's
too.
this great search engine called GoOggle, and you can actually go find it out. So
Go Woggle.
Go, Oggle! Cold medicine's doing its work, isn't it, Jeff?
oh, it's working great. It's working really good.
So, Kavya, with the holiday season just behind us, there was a lot of virtual reality type stuff. I don't see a lot of my friends telling me about it. I didn't get any of that stuff for Christmas. Where are we in terms of virtual reality, so that we can then kind of segue into what are some of the security concerns?
So I feel like past decade, and it's very remarkable that it's 2020, at least the people, the stakeholder that are in it and trying to build these brave new virtual worlds are really very excited. I mean, to us, I don't know if we're living in a bubble, but it really feels like it has sort of arrived. And now 2020 is going to be the time that it really just goes in the hands of common people. And when I say common people, it's going to start from the Valley, which has already begun. So over the holidays, the Quest that sells for like $400 was selling for $1,200 per piece. That was the demand. And it has, so that's a headset that is made by Facebook. And suddenly, before we used to use touch controllers to navigate through the environment, the immersive environments, they've actually sort of figured out a way to now just use the hands. So all you have now is a headset and your hands, and you can sort of navigate, play video games and do stuff like that.
I thought, didn't Microsoft's, what was Microsoft's, we did a segment on it when Russell.
HoloLens. Yep.
HoloLens,
Yeah.
but that's not virtual reality, that's augmented reality, right?
That's mixed reality,
Mixed, okay.
where you can sort of manipulate the environment that you're within using these sort of headsets and immersive controls.
Right, because you still
that
see the environment around you, because we did it here in the studio. You'd see that, but then you'd see stuff overlaid over it.
Exactly. And that's truly important, because we're facing tremendous challenges like climate change. And that is one thing. And creating empathy towards these very dry topics, or security itself. Can you imagine if we could just, visualize and play with the data of Security Operations Center in an immersive setting? And you could pretty much put as many screens in front of you as you want. And then you manipulate the data within that environment. I mean, you've created this amazing universe where you're not just typing and looking through flat screen. It sounds sci-fi, but it isn't that far.
Yeah, because I'm thinking Tony Stark in all the Marvel movies. I mean, his interfaces to the computer are very much what you're describing.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, though, I've played with those, and the very first thing that comes to my mind is like, what about security? Like every time somebody like gets excited, it's like, hey, this is happening and all this, I get nervous. I'm like, so what happens if it gets hacked?
So how does that? How is security different? I guess, or insecurity different in a virtual reality or mixed reality environment?
So that's a very, very interesting question. There are things that we still don't know, but there are things that we have discovered. So the co-founder of XR Safety Initiative, Abraham Bijeli, really good friend of mine, he's a assistant dean at New Haven University. His team actually discovered novel attacks. So what they were able to do is they were able to move the subject within the VR environment without the knowledge. They were able to hijack the camera that does inside out tracking or could potentially see whatever is going on around you. So all these sort of novel ways to hack. Imagine if somebody can literally hack your vision, like whatever you're seeing right now could be hacked. So now your sense of reality is hacked, and more realistic these environments become. Eventually, we could, propagate all kinds of things like misinformation, deep fakes, propaganda, like all of these threats are going to inevitably come to these environments as the mass adoption happens. And that's
So-
the other part. Yeah.
Do you see a lot of interest around, say, like terrorist groups or criminal syndicates where they're leveraging these VR or augmented realities to do covert communication channels, even I don't know, different ways in which they're collaborating? Is that becoming a target as far as things that people are looking at as far as the security goes? Because there's the regular security risks, and then you start to think about, if we're creating an entirely new reality, we're opening up possibilities that either governments or law enforcement or the general security of our community needs to be able to, or wants to be able to, look into, right? So these are going to be big questions that are going to come up as we move forward.
100% right. And that's why the whole unique experience of Second Life comes in handy. Because, you have created now these avenues of communication. The underlying economy was there. So, of course, 4chan, 8chan, all these terrorist activities were obviously noticed. Not just terrorist activities, not just international, but domestic. And, I'm not going to go into too much details, but, FBI was constantly monitoring these things, and there are video games that are monitored. So yeah, these are the threats that we have to care about. And then there is the application security side of things. Like, how are these worlds being built? So these are being built by using cloud native technologies. How can those be hacked, or how can we prevent? And that's like the quest that has taken me to now work with Wallarm and their sort of hacker intelligence. These guys, Ivan and Stefan, they've put together, a bunch of these products that kind of enable and sort of prevent hacking activities and sort of staying ahead of these novel 0 days, all these type of vulnerabilities. It's pretty remarkable. I just am amazed at how these two come together,
Yeah, it's interesting, Kavya, when you describe that, because there's two very distinct attack vectors or threats, if you will, right? Threats is the wrong word, but one is you're attacking the infrastructure that's creating the virtual world, right? And that's one thing. But along those, what Tyler was saying, it kind of makes me think of the Holiday Hack Challenge, right? Where if you create this environment, people who want to commit crime, right, and need a communication channel of some kind can basically use that as a communication channel. I guess my question is, like, how is that different or better or worse for criminals to communicate inside of a virtual world versus using something like the dark web or steganography or something like that?
That's like, so those are the questions that we're going to have to answer as we see, like, what are the controls in place? If there is no encryption in place, then it is easy to monitor. And that's why, so XR Safety Initiative is partnering with something called as Gamers Safer. That's another organization. Their whole goal is to build APIs that would continuously monitor these environments for these type of malicious activities. So those are like, controls that would have to be built depending on how is this infrastructure is being built. Is encryption in place? Or, is the peer-to-peer communication, can you monitor it? All of these activities would have to be taken into account. In fact, with that, we are also rolling out something called like a 3C security framework. And that's where you have to look at, okay, are you just trying to connect with people? Are you just trying to build a virtual world? Or are you doing a payment transaction that is commerce? So depending on which pillar you fall in, your risk goes higher and higher. So what Tyler indicated, it comes under the connect category. And then you would have to like build controls based on what is going on in that virtual world. So obviously, think about how it is being built, all of that.
Oh, sorry, Lee?
So I'm thinking about this, and I got real pedestrian in my thinking, and I was thinking that, excuse me, if you're manipulating what the viewer is seeing, I mean, you're jumping into also social engineering, and I started thinking about, we train people how to recognize social engineering. How do we train them to recognize it when the virtual world is no longer genuine anymore, particularly if I'm manipulating what, the SOC analyst working with data is doing? How do we go there?
And that's the thing. So far, what I've discovered is we've got to use the similar technologies to solve the challenges of these emerging worlds. So Facebook has put together, like the Facebook AI lab, and it's the same issue that we face with disinformation and deep fakes. So how do you actually determine whether something is a deep fake? You have to run it through the algorithm. So they have actually recently developed successfully an algorithm that just runs through the clip. And within like a matter of 20 seconds, it is successfully able to establish like, oh, that is 100% deepfake, or that is 20%. And then we're gonna have to move to these technologies to combat these threats. And that's
also. I have a question. Can you see a point in time, and I hope the answer is going to be yes, where the user of virtual reality technologies, no matter what environment they're interfacing with, has the ability to perform some sort of digital validation check while they're in the environment for authenticity?
Ask me that question differently, because I don't understand. Do you mean that?
So what I'm imagining is, if there was an object of some sort in the environment that the user could manipulate and say, tell me how, whether the, let's say for lack of better words, whether the digital hash, maybe a SHA-1 hash or something like that, matches the original content that's being displayed to me. Or in this time sequence, is the content been modified in any way? Can you see some sort of way that the actual user could have a validation mechanism in the environment?
Wow. And wow. I have to absolutely say amazing question, because you know what? Our first meeting, we're talking about this 3C framework, and one of the guys, Dennis Vanella, he actually, he brought this up, and it's called provenance. It's like basically trying to establish that this is the origin and the authenticity of this object. This is a word that is used by art collectors. So see, that's a novel risk. I can't believe you guys are geniuses, that within this 30 minutes of talk, you've already reached where we reached after like few interactions. We're like, oh, this is a novel risk. So yes, that is a huge one. Be able to establish the authenticities of the objects, of the people, because you can create multiple identities and whatnot, is going to be massive. And that's provenance risk is coming to virtual reality. Yep.
How hard a problem is that? How hard is that problem to solve? It seems like you'd need a lot of baseline and or resources.
Face ID's already fixed it, right? It's already there. But that's also taken into account that the platform and the hardware is all the same. Like now we're talking about the fact that from a VR standpoint,
you've got a temporal issue here. You've got a temporal issue here. This is not a static content thing.
That's the thing.
It's interesting to identify what's bad. You have to know what's good. And
Right.
Facebook, as an example, has done an amazing job in the past 5 years of accurately identifying people's faces. And I'll give you an example. I uploaded a picture to Facebook with myself and 2 of my friends who I went to high school with, automatically tag them within seconds of me uploading it.
Wow.
Now, most users look at that and go, oh, like, that was pretty cool. And I'm like, the software and hardware, like
No.
Tyler's saying behind all of that, and the algorithm, like, that is really scary, actually.
It's amazing and terrifying at the same time.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
Well, what I'm encouraged by, though, is that that you guys have thought of it, and I have to assume that you're going to allocate resources to actually work on that particular issue, because I think that is going to be at the core of a lot of issues. And if that large problem can be solved in a generalizable way, it's going to be extremely popular technology. So I applaud
Joff,
you guys for working on it. I got to assume that you're working on it. It's going to be fantastic to get there.
Joff and Kavya, what I find is amazing is that when we look at validating the website that a user is going to, right, they're not inside of a virtual world, right? Like, they still have the exterior world that they can interact with and check on things, and they may look at the certificate of the website. They can visually see the URL in the browser. When you step inside a virtual world, how do we then have that same level of validation to know that the store I'm going to in the virtual world is really the store, or is it just someone stealing my money?
And I think there's another one, too, that we missed there that I want to get to, and I want to make sure I'm understanding the word when I use it this way, too, is that how are we even sure we stepped into the right timeline?
Right.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Like, forget the object. Make sure we've stepped to the right goddamn planet.
Exactly. And there is a thing called persistence. So if you try to create persistence, you have to establish the coordinate that you left, right? So you could come back to it. And those coordinates is what you're using to create these timelines that are persistent. Well, guess what? If I can get to those coordinates as a hacker, I can hack your reality with the blink of an eye. So those things are, that's a very scary idea, yes.
That just sounds like an 80s punk rock band, Hack Your Reality.
Could be.
My current feeling is that I have to express is I just want to take this entire discussion off the show, and we need to be sitting face to face to have like the rest of the evening, because this is like entered the exact space it should. And it is, as an intellectual discussion, a fantastic discussion to have.
Jeff, you just need to get invited onto the Enterprise. That's all.
That's right.
Singularity defense. Yes, you will all get an invite, and it would be lovely to bring you all into sort of a virtual reality environment and continue the same discussion, because that's what we need. We need to pull in this knowledge from all sorts of domains, even from like neuroscientific perspective, because people are now capturing brainwaves.
It's interesting, Kavya. I'm thinking back in trying to go through stories we might have covered on this subject, and it's just intermixing with all the sci-fi movies that I've watched, over the years, and I'm having trouble discerning in my head, did I cover that on the show, or is that something I saw in like a Marvel movie or something? But what I also find
it's not
interesting
that far off.
Is it potentially, and as we've seen with new technologies, a very easy vehicle for criminals to hide inside of, right? If a criminal can take control of the virtual environment, they could create pockets and or rooms. And I want to say I've seen this with video games in the past, and it might have been in a movie or TV show, or it might have been in reality, I'm not sure.
Or a little bit of both.
They created like basically a special room, almost like a cheat code in a game, right? And if you know the code, then you can get in, and all that's hidden from the company running that particular game. I want to say that might have been a TV show, but it's applicable, I think.
Like a plot.
That's real.
Right. Is that
totally real.
That's real
that is
too,
happening
right?
now. That is happening right this second. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So in other words, we're kind of asking, how do you do your out of band validation, right? Not relying on the service, but on something you trust, right? Isn't that part of the equation?
Right. Yeah, it is, and that's why
Mind-blowing.
You do have to work with the hardware software provider. You have to work with regulators. You have to work with we have to tell the agencies like FBI and everything is how the risk assessment needs to be done. some of the agencies have no idea how to even investigate these things. So like you have to work with these people to try to bring in awareness, and that's kind of where it's going to begin.
Well, listen to this. Who said pen testing is dead? We have a trajectory that is straight into the mixed reality, baby.
We're gonna hack Jeff Mann's enterprise invite, and we're gonna send him to the Millennium Falcon or something.
But I think
His timeline's gonna be messed up.
But Kavya, I think your point where we separated the kind of gameplay user experience from the fact that this technology is being hosted largely in the cloud, right? And protecting that infrastructure, I think, is probably the most important thing, right? Because if someone can get into the back-end infrastructure, right? If you think about containers, is essentially creating a virtual reality environment for your application, right? And one security mechanism is, well, I'm just going to destroy that and create a new one. But if the attacker's inside of the underlying infrastructure, it means whatever virtual world you create, like their backdoor room is going to be there, their fake store is just always going to be there. Similar to maybe malware hiding inside of a, BIOS or firmware, right?
Exactly. All of these existing risks, things that we're using. These days we're using microservices to build infrastructures. So you're going to have to find ways and absolutely make sure that if you are able to facilitate connect or commerce, you're going to want to protect those microservices, just like a normal fintech organization would. They're going to want to protect their north, south, east, west, all these APIs if they're using some kind of Kubernetes infrastructure or these Envoy type of technologies. They have to, because essentially, what is virtual world? It is code. It's that infrastructure, and that's why that's where this marriage of Wallarm and somehow XR Safety Initiative knowledge, it makes perfect sense to me to work with these guys. Because we're going to have to hack these environments and learn, and then sort of protect them.
So, Kavya, tell me a little bit about your work today at Wallarm.
So at Wallarm, I actually, in fact, just about yesterday, I finished writing that article. I was doing sort of a gratitude article writing for a bunch of people that have been, very, very important in the past 1 year in my life. And Stefan and Ivan, the whole conversation really started with, the Cloudflare outage that broke the internet. And then they told me about, Wallarm has this non-regex-based web application firewall. So I'm like, it was the regex that broke the internet. How do you guys do this? So I got intrigued, and that's how the interview led to discovering more. But I found out they have another way that they're protecting these APIs is plugging the application security testing framework right into the CI/CD pipeline. So all of these sort of Wallarm's products and knowledge that I learned, it started to make me think like, hey, you know what? I want to know more. And then more I learn about these, and fairly recently they launched another Envoy Kubernetes native security protection. So I'm like, okay, I really need to put these technologies in the right hands, in the hands of the people who really need it.
Well, and one of the things you said was really awesome, which is that the internet, and I'm summarizing and paraphrasing, the internet's a safer place without regex, right? I think we can all agree on that.
No. I take exception to that. I think it's the exact opposite.
Well, when it comes to WAFs, though, I'm with Kavya on that one. Regex has no place in WAF technology.
WAFs.
Don't put a regex in a single point of failure. It's going to be like, and especially like those PCRA-based regex, it's going to be like, I need to process myself. I must process myself. So the best way to do is, sort of recursive learning, what Wallarm does.
Yeah.
There's only a few organizations.
Yeah, and Kavya, to Josh's point, I'm not saying regex is a bad idea. The application of it in the WAF technology is just a bad idea. We've talked about that, for years. Yeah. So it's refreshing to see new approaches to implementing some type of web application firewall.
It's like anything. You can have excellent technology, like regular expressions, that are used really poorly.
Really poorly. That's exactly it. It's exactly it. Yes. More questions for Kavya?
No, I just want to go work with her.
I think we all do.
I want to know what hardware is going to be required for that invite to the
I have a
enterprise.
Oh, yes. So here's what we're doing. We are literally going to ship Oculus Quest to whoever accepts the invite and whoever is invited. So it's invite only. A couple of my friends have already sort of signed up for it. So we're going to ship you a Quest that you can potentially, first you look around, use whatever, and then come into the environment, into the timeline. Singularity Defense is the timeline. That's the first one. And then, you could potentially break it apart, hack it, do whatever you want with it, keep it, enjoy it. So yeah, that's the goal. And it's unfortunate that I have to rely on Quest because I'm not a big fan of Facebook. And it's Oculus Quest, it's run by Facebook. However, that's really like the best, more like a user-friendly, the seamless technology that we've got thus far.
Do you think a lot of these companies and or technologies are going to get much more readily available, or do you think that the companies that are doing it really well, like Oculus and even Magic Leap, but if I remember reading right in the news, like they were not turning a great profit, so the entry into VR or augmented reality or whichever one they're playing in, do you think that's going to be limited to a certain select few companies, or do you think that's going to become more readily available for companies to dive in as far as hardware goes?
It's going to become more readily available. And nobody would believe it today if I said so, but there are companies like Emerge.io. That's a startup right out of LA. And there are other companies in stealth that are working on these ideas. And that's the thing about the Valley and around California and even in Germany. Like there is another headset called Vario. They have literally established a very precise eye tracking. Just by 2 minutes of tracking you within the VR, they could tell you your user habits. They could tell you where you're looking, exactly the pixel that you looked at. And it's scary. When you first look at it from a security perspective, it's crazy scary. So there are companies that are going to compete with these massive empires, absolutely, and they must, because we can't just hand over all of our data to these people. At the moment,
that's kind of the scary part, right? Like the big players that are playing in the space right now are the big players that are maintaining the data and or have access to a lot of the ad data or demographics, and keeping that and tying that to the virtual reality and or our virtual reality personas obviously isn't in our best interest.
Well, it makes me wonder if they weren't just on this path all along, right? As I mentioned earlier, being able to identify faces, I think, was just the first step, right? Now Facebook's getting more into the virtual reality world. They have to know how to identify people's faces to move further along in this space.
Oh, and get this. Have you heard of gaze data? That's like another thing. So you know how you can sort of do the heat map of where you're looking on the browser? Well, within the virtual reality and augmented mixed reality, you can literally establish where the person is gazing. Like whether you're looking at it from a love perspective or whether you're just angry, like your psychographic profile, all of that.
There's an entire psychology study or discipline based on how you gaze and looking at, say, an image flashed up. In fact, I think it was Chris Sanders was doing a lot of research around, as you're shown images, where your attention is drawn on the image and what that says about a certain mood or whether or not you're lying or disinformation pieces. So tying all of those psychology pieces and psyops into virtual reality as you're being shown things, I imagine from an advertising standpoint and or maybe a psyop standpoint, that could get really interesting.
Yeah, and hey, if Cambridge Analytica was a scandal, wait till all this data gets combined with, DNC hacks and all of it. As soon as the mass adoption happens, all of these risks are coming together and more.
And then you add AI into that and ML and
yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I just think he said all the buzzwords. Everybody's got a drink.
We all got a drink.
Wait.
The law.
I read Kavya's profile, and she has PCI listed. So my question is, to round out the buzzwords, how has PCI impacted your research in the virtual world or the mixed reality worlds?
Drink.
So that's the third pillar, right? As soon as you do commerce and you're going to inevitably going to trade stuff within these virtual environments. You're going to use these APIs to trade. How are you going to establish the integrity of those payments? And then even if you do or you don't, who's going to regulate these, organizations?
Can I be a virtual QSA?
Virtual CISOs are there. Why not? I don't see the reason why.
So I had a question from a different angle. So we talked about where VR is coming from, who's producing it. How about on your side with your, XRSI? How much spread are you getting? Are you seeing impacts outside of Silicon Valley, outside the United States? How's that going? Getting awareness outside of where you physically are.
So, well, first of all, for XRSI, it's been great. However, when I was in Dubai and I talked about virtual reality risks, literally there was a guy who literally told me, if you are so worried, you should go to the kitchen. So that happens too. I'm not saying that Dubai's response is that. I'm just saying there are times and locations that people just really don't understand that this is real and this is coming for us. That's not just to say Dubai, that's a lot of places. So I have to find creative ways to create awareness. In fact, one of our advisors is Amber Asadorian or Kandarian. And she talks about something called a sexy knowledge. So to tell these risks to Gen Z, to tell these risks to like common man, we have to make, these ideas sort of sexy, sort of sellable. So I use like Star Wars analogy, like what happened when, the risks of the data left on a hard drive and nobody cared. And even if it was noticed, it was just an alert and nobody responded. So those kinds of things, I use those analogy to try to attribute awareness.
There's no life forms in that escape pod, so we're not going to shoot it down to conserve labor.
Exactly. See, that's security policy right there. So those are the things. And, we've partnered with Stop, Think, Connect, and you guys probably know National Cybersecurity Alliance does this security awareness around the globe for like 22 plus countries. So in 2020, we're going to reboot the campaign, the existing campaign, Stop, Think, Connect, and add these virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality risks, and then sort of like propagate that and just have them be the vehicle of distribution. So awareness is going to be huge this year.
Yep. And how do you keep it fresh and not stale? So people think, that's totally last year. I mean, how is that? Is that just as hard or harder?
It's very hard because I think we're just starting. So I think, so the last time Stop, Think, Connect was updated was in 2009. Just think about that. They are still talking about the risks that were established in 2009. So in June 2019, I met with Peter Cassidy and another person, Matt, and we talked about disinformation, misinformation, deep fakes, and the XR risks. So now in 2020, we're going to reboot this campaign and push it out to the rest of the world and talk about all of these risks because we have to. If we won't, then who else would?
So you're going to keep it alive, which is awesome. That's probably going to be one of the harder challenges, is just keeping it in people's mind and not letting it get swept off the table.
Yes, and just like I said, sexy knowledge. Like we have to find ways to make it awesome. So it's not just like, whatever security, whatever privacy, who cares? You have to find a way to stick it.
And Lee, you had, we start down this whole augmented, all the other reality words to go along with this. And you mentioned when you make it in your mind, and that was kind of an interesting one to me, because I envisioned that world, that cyberpunk world, where we no longer have to wear the goggles to enter the virtual world, you plug the cable into your neck and it interfaces directly to your brain. Which
there had to be a Matrix reference
because I'm totally ready to
not.
sign up for that because I am blind as a bat and it's not going to get any better as I get older. So
we have NFC, Larry. Like we have NFC, we got Bluetooth.
But
like,
that's not enough bandwidth for what we need to do.
We do have DCI coming up if you want to make it even more intense right now. Like, I spoke with Alex. He's the CEO of Neurosity. They just shipped a brain-computer interface computer. You can just put on your headset. It records all your data. You can browse your, computer. You can do a bunch of things. No, non-invasive. And then there is the invasive part, which is, there is so much going on.
That's like a whole interview of itself.
Blue pill.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for that for years because keyboards are such a slow interface. Let's think about it. I mean, if you're sitting here
that's it,
and you're a
Joff. Just think
developer,
about it. Just think about it. You're done.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can have a direct brain interface. The keyboard, how quaint.
It would be cool, except that'd be an accelerated garbage in, garbage out for me.
Well, not for my brain. My brain's super high quality. Just to let you know.
Let me get my hip waders, Joff. But no, seriously, I think it'd be awesome to just have a neural interface. That could be really exciting. And of course, nobody would ever hack that, right? Nobody would find ways to interfere with that data stream.
That's the wish list, but then there is the reality. And that's why we continue to talk to these people who are, we want that. We want the BCI. We want all these, digitization. But we got to be able to trust. We got to maintain the trust. And that's the goal.
Yeah,
I think we should lean. I'm sorry, bro. I think we should lean more towards 60s sci-fi than 80s sci-fi. That's my opinion.
Well, I think it's very much the same issues we're talking about, Jeff. Right?
It is. That was a serious statement.
Yeah. No, that's it.
But you have to know what I'm talking about. That's all.
Well, maybe with Star Trek.
Elaborate?
Star Trek versus how many 80s sci-fi movies that were virtual alternate realities based, scanners, dreamscape, not exactly virtual reality, but you can use your imagination.
Lawnmower Man.
Lawnmower
Man.
Oh
yes.
That may have been early 90s. Yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah.
But I'll take the holodeck any day. Which is technically next generation.
So,
but what,
So what about if we've got folks that want to know how to learn more and get deeper involved in what you've got going on? Where should they go? Who should they talk to?
So yes, that's a good question, and they should go on to www.xrsi.org, and we are running a public working group to build these 3C framework that I talked about. We just had one public working group finish, which was called XR Data Classification Framework working group. Basically, we were trying to establish, classifications of data, like sensitive data within these virtual worlds. Because we have HIPAA data, we have PCI data, all of these other sets of categories. Cloud even has like definitions and data, but we don't have it for these new virtual worlds. So that's the first foundation. And then be able to see that in immersive environment and what's happening to the data. That's like later. But yeah, so go on to www.xrsi.org and you can join the Discord channel with our partner, which is OpenAR Cloud. You can potentially, sign up for these public working groups and start plugging in your knowledge. And there are a lot of researchers, neuroscientists, and a bunch of other folks that are coming together to help out. Because essentially, this is just a nonprofit. And that's the other part is use technologies, especially if you're in fintech, if you're in SaaS, and you are, building these cloud native stuff. You're either building virtual world or any other advanced, simple technology. Use stuff like Wallarm. Use Gen 3 detection in your WAF. Use, Kubernetes east-west protection, not just north-south. So Those are the things that are going to significantly improve the way we do security and protection.
Fantastic. Kavya, we just have 5 questions remaining for you. All of our guests are asked the 5 questions with Security Weekly.
Every one of them.
And it's interesting, we played this not only at our holiday party, but I played it at my family holiday party. And we all filled it out with no names on them, and then we had to guess based on the answers who had filled out the questions. So
that's when you find out which uncle is really the dirty-minded uncle.
Right? So, Kavya, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Okay, let's do this.
3 words to describe yourself.
Ethical, integrity, passionate.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Whoa. Like a thread of glass. So when you kill somebody, it's like maybe it doesn't really hurt that much. I don't know. Compassionate.
It's quick death. Quick death.
Quick
Lethal
death.
but painless.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Wow. Woman of choice. And I only say that. Can I elaborate?
Sure.
Yeah.
There's no right
So I
or
don't
wrong
know if
answer
you-
here.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you guys, I don't know if you noticed, but my first name is Hindu. My last name is Jewish, and I do visibly practice Islam and I'm Muslim. So this is only possible in America, because in many other countries I'd be dead if I did that. So I feel like, that's me. I'm a woman of choice.
Wow, that's amazing. I feel like we should applaud right now. That is incredible.
I agree, Jeff. I agree.
I'm thinking don't die, girl. This is cool.
Yeah.
I have a question after we're done 5 questions, but
Okay.
Carry on, Paul.
Question 4. In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
First.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead,
Live,
fictional,
dead,
or otherwise.
Fictional or otherwise.
Celebrities?
Or famous people. A lot of people.
And celebrity.
Oh my God.
Celebrity is a
Okay.
loose term, right?
Yes.
Because you could be a celebrity in your own mind.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So I want Elon Musk to be my father, and I want, oh my gosh, the judge. Oh my God, she's my inspiration. How
Judge
could I
Judy?
forget her
Judge
name?
Judy?
No, not Judy.
Oh, no, you mean the Supreme Court judge.
Yes, the justice.
Yeah.
Bader Ginsburg.
Ruth Bader.
Yes.
There you go.
RGB, yes.
I don't
Fantastic.
think Elon, I
Awesome.
don't think she would be his type, but I suppose you could go for that.
This is a fictitious game, Joff. There's no
Yeah,
right or
that's right.
wrong answer.
Don't
Problem, not
overthink
yours.
it.
Don't
I want,
overthink it.
I want the brain and I want the courage. Those are the 2 things.
And Joff, don't forget, this is now 2020. It could have, in fact, been Ruth Bader
be
Ginsburg and Ruth
whoever-
Bader Ginsburg.
Whoever
So-
you want. That's right.
Oh,
could-
and,
you
and
don't-
by the way, Kavra, by the way, I think you do have the courage per the last question. You absolutely have the courage.
You had the courage to come on this show and sit with all of us lunatics here at Security Weekly. So for that and a
think
whole
this is our
host of
first
other
instance of
reasons, we
courage.
are very thankful that you appeared on the
Jeff
show.
had a
And of
question.
course, you're welcome back anytime because obviously people still have more questions, and we
Yeah.
feel like we have a lot more to discuss.
And Lee
so
said he had a question, and
open
Jeff had a
invitation.
question.
Jeff did.
No, I had a question,
Jeff.
and it's not one that we can answer, because we're closing down the segment. But I'm curious to your thoughts on the ethics of these virtual environments, and the fact that you're sort of, crossing over 3 major religious ethical groups, and you can do that in America. How do you transcend that into a virtual world? What are the ethics of religious or nation state or whatever you want to call it thought in a virtual world? We'll have to talk about that the next time we get together.
They do, and that's a very profound question. In fact, something that I faced when I was at Linden Lab, because I created an avatar that had this, headscarf on, and right away people assumed that I'm bringing in Sharia, not knowing who I really am.
Huh.
So
Right.
those were like the underlying talks. So you have to be really careful, and then it's going to depend on who operates, who governs, How do we bring about ethics? It's going to go all the way up to the level of United Nations once the mass adoption happens. But this is exactly what we need. We need to have these conversations, the tough ones.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, you're welcome to come back on the show to have all of those conversations.
Beam me up, Kavya.
Kavya.
Oh my God. This is the worst thing you did. I'm one of those people who can't do that. See? Oh, gosh.
Because you know what? There's no source of intelligence life down here, Scotty.
That's right. Certainly not here in the studio, but thankfully we had Kavya to bring that intelligence to the show. Kavya, thank you so much for appearing on Security Weekly.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you all for having me.
And with that, we will take a short break, come back with our next interview. Stay tuned for Chris Painter coming up next.